Happy New Year. What's going on? Sunny Waffles. I just wanted to watch this video of Ted Cruz asking a simple question to 3 Democrats. And with this question alone, he not only disqualified all of them for being on any sort of board position in Congress or having anything to do with government, but he also exposed the entire Democratic Party as being liars, corrupt, and evil in their agenda. It's amazing to see. What we're talking about today is voter ID, and any sane person will go like, yeah, you should have to show identification to vote. Because voting is it's not a right, it's a privilege, and it's a privilege for American citizens. And the Democrats, they don't want Americans to vote, because Americans don't vote for Democrats. Let's watch.
I want to start with a question for each of the 5 witnesses. In your judgment, are voter ID laws racist? Professor Tolson.
Very, very simple question. Are voter ID laws racist? Look at this idiot.
Thank you for that question. So it depends. One thing we have to stop doing is treating all voter ID laws as the same.
Okay, sure. You heard her. We gotta not treat all voter ID laws the same. This is a Democrat.
Okay, so your answer, I want to move quickly, so it depends is your answer?
Yes, that's my answer.
Okay, so what voter ID laws are racist?
That's a very cool follow-up question. What voter ID laws are racist? You would think she can answer this, right? Let's see if they answer. What voter ID laws are racist?
Apologies, Mr. Cruz, your state of Texas, perhaps?
She said Texas. What voter ID laws are racist? The Democrat answered Texas.
Okay, so you think the entire state of Texas is racist. What about requiring an ID to vote is racist?
So I think, sir, that's pretty reductive. I'm not saying the entire state of Texas is.
She said that's pretty reductive.
Perhaps.
Voter ID laws are racist.
Apologies, Mr. Cruz, your state of Texas, perhaps?
Okay.
You see that stupid look she put on her fucking face? Saw that stupid look she put on her face? Texas, perhaps? Where's this guy been? You live under a rock? Texas. That's your answer to what laws are racist. They don't care about you. They're lying right to your face. They don't care about you. They're dumb. It's like...
Okay, so you think the entire state of Texas is racist. What about requiring an ID to vote is racist?
Explain.
So I think, sir, that's pretty reductive. I'm not saying the entire state of Texas is racist.
You just said my state of Texas, so you tell me, what about the Texas voter ID laws is racist?
So the fact that the voter ID law was put into place to diminish the political power of Latinos.
What law? What law? Like you said, Texas. What law? What law? What law was put into place to hurt Latinos?
With racist intent, and have been found.
She called it racist. That's all she did. That's all they do. That's all they do. It's evil. It's disgusting, and it's dumb. It's stupid. Like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here?
You're asserting that. What's your evidence for that?
The federal district court that first resolved the constitutionality of Texas's voter ID law.
Okay, so your view is voter ID laws are racist. How about you, Mr. Yang?
That's it. And he's right, because that's her view. That's all she said. That's all she said. Like she didn't bring up a law, a data, statistic, a fact. All she said was, well, they put the law in to hurt Latinos. It was like, the Latinos she's talking about are Mexicans, like that don't live in our country, that aren't American citizens, like Mexican citizens. That's the Latinos she's talking about. Like,
I agree with Professor Tolson. Voter ID.
Of course, the second Democrat agree. Let's see why he agrees.
Laws can be racist.
Okay, that's okay. Mr. Sides.
He said they can be racist. How? Why? When?
There are some voter ID laws that are racially discriminatory in intent.
There are some laws that are racially discriminatory in intent. Name one. Just name one. If there's so many, if they're all out here, name one.
In practice, in intent, fine, you say there's some racist with a malevolent intent lurking in the back of their mind. But let's just talk about it as a practical matter. When I go to vote, they ask me for my ID. I pull out my ID, I show it to them, I vote. Is that racist?
If the law that requires you to do that was motivated by racially discriminatory intent
What about the
under
effects?
our...
He said if the law was motivated racially, then yeah, it's racist. This is like, and who's determining the motive? The Democrats. These guys. They're like, oh, we say your motive is racist. This is like, it's a never-ending racket. It's a never-ending racket, and that's because racism does not exist. It doesn't exist. This is proof that racism doesn't exist right here, because he's like, hey, just give us a law that's racist. They can't do it. They're like, oh, your intent is racist. They're like, you're a racist. That's all they got. They're liars. They're evil, and they're liars. Like, and I think the sad part is people are gonna watch this and they'll still vote Democrat. People will watch this and they'll still go like, the Democrats have my best interest in mind. They believe the same things I believe. And I was like, hey, you're an idiot too. Hello? Is this thing on?
Set aside intent. I'm asking about the effect.
There is no effect.
I think that there are discriminatory effects from a number of voter ID laws.
Okay.
He said, yeah, there's an effect. Whoa, what's the effect?
Go ahead.
That Mexicans can't vote.
In effects, I think many voter ID laws are discriminatory.
And Mexicans,
in design,
name one.
are
Name one.
designed to have that effect.
Name one, dummy. Name one, dum. But and Mexicans mean citizens of Mexico. That's a Mexican, a citizen from Mexico. That's why they don't say Mexican, they say Latino, because Latino just involves the entire South America, I guess. But everybody shouldn't be able to vote in our elections. They're not American citizens. How about Americans? If you're an American citizen, you'll have an ID. It's so simple. A Mexican that I work with at Amazon, which Amazon is actually full of blacks, but that's because black people were born here and we have IDs and we can get legal jobs. The Mexican told me, he was like, Mexicans would take all of these jobs, but they can't because they're illegal. They don't have IDs. It was like the Mexican I was working with, he was born here. He grew up in Chicago, but it's just, I was like, that's just so funny to me, because I'm like, you're right. It's like these Mexicans will gladly take our jobs and work these jobs, but they literally can't because they don't have the right to work here because they're not citizens. But they can vote. You know why they can vote? Because they don't have ID laws in Illinois. They don't have ID laws. They don't. I remember when I voted in this upcoming election, I had my wallet and everything, and I was like, oh, I'll take out my ID and vote. They didn't ask for that. They didn't ask for it. And then they wonder why we got so many fake votes, fake ballots, because they don't want to secure our elections. They're liars.
No, sir.
Mr. Van Spakovsky.
No, particularly because every single state that has passed an ID law has put in a provision to provide a free ID to anyone who doesn't have one.
It's so simple. And then there's literal voter IDs you can get to vote.
Everyone that the current version of the Texas voter ID law for in-person voting, the Obama administration agreed in court, in a court filing, that they were satisfied with it and it was not discriminatory.
I have to say this range of question actually shows the wildly partisan nature of the Democrats' proposal.
It does.
The record should reflect all three of the Democratic witnesses invited by the chairman.
All three.
Maintained to this committee that voter ID laws can be, in many instances, in most instances, I think of the various ways they formulated.
Various ways.
So let me tell you who disagrees with that. 35 states across the country disagree with that because 35 states have voter ID laws in effect. But not just 35
I don't know why 50 states don't have voter ID laws.
81% of voters in America disagree with the radical views proposed by the Democrats and the Democratic
Most
Party.
black people disagree.
81% of Americans. 77% of black voters in America support voter ID laws.
Yeah, because we're not idiots.
78% of Hispanic voters in America support voter ID laws.
Hispanic Americans, not Mexicans. And you know why they agree? Because they came to America, they did it the right way, and they're citizens. So they're like, hey, I did it the right way. I'm a good person. I got my ID. I can vote. There's not a problem for them. They don't vote Democrat. I guarantee you that.
Maldev should think about that. 81% of low-income Americans support voter ID laws.
Yeah. Because even low-income Americans have IDs, because it's not hard to get an ID. Have you went to school? Did you go to school? You get a school ID. We all know this. It's like, you want to get one of those voter IDs? You can get a voter ID. Do you drive? You can get an ID. It's not hard.
And yet,
State IDs. There's literal state IDs you can get.
what this bill is about is putting radicals in charge of saying if you require an ID to vote, that is racist and must be struck down.
Yup.
This is all about partisan power. Now,
Yup. The left is radical. The radical left, you can't. The issue is we know what radical right looks like. They look like dictators. But the radical left is just a lot of idiots. It's just a lot of idiots working together and voting together, which is scary. It's terrifying.
DOJ has also said, under the Biden administration, that it is not going to presume that that a state acts lawfully if it simply returns to pre-COVID voting laws. Ms. Reardon, Mr. Van Spakovsky, what does that tell you if they say after a pandemic, if you go back to the laws that existed before, DOJ is not going to assume that that's okay? Well, what does that tell you about the partisan nature of DOJ?
By issuing the guidance that they did, it says to me that what they would like to do is make permanent the emergency procedures that were instituted by many states through litigation by the DNC throughout the country prior to the 2020 election, and they would like those to be permanent. And so rather than
Why would they want to make permanent emergency procedures that they implemented in our elections? What?
that
Huh?
they are temporary, they are going to go after states that decide to go back to their original election procedures.
Well, and I think they also think Democrats did well under those emergency procedures.
Yeah, they did.
Keeping those emergency procedures in place will predictably benefit Democrats. You know, I would note, in addition to disagreeing with the vast majority...
They sure did do well, right? All those dead people who were able to vote all of a sudden. They did very well thanks to mail-in ballots. Yeah. Just one more time. Let's look at these dumbass Democrats say something is racist and not point at what it is.
Latinos with racist intent and have been found to have
You're
racist
asserting that.
intent.
What's your evidence?
Right. What's your
The
evidence?
federal district court that first
The court. The court. The court.
resolved the constitutionality of Texas's voter ID law.
Okay, so your view is voter ID laws are racist. How about you?
Disqualified.
I agree with Professor Tolson. Voter ID laws can be racist.
Disqualified.
Mr. Science?
There are some voter ID laws that are racially discriminatory.
Disqualified.
How about
Dumb, dumb, and dumber.
Fine, you say there's some racist with a malevolent intent lurking in the back of their mind. But let's just talk about it as a practical matter. When I go to vote,
He said, as a practical matter.
they ask me for my ID. I
Yep.
pull out my ID, I show it to them, I vote.
Yep.
Is that racist?
If the law that requires you to do that was motivated by racially discriminatory intent
What about the
under
effect?
What about the actual law? Like, disqualified. Idiot. What about the law? He doesn't talk about the law. You know why? Because it's not racist. It's a waste of time. Racism is a propaganda term used by the government, just like anti-vax. Racism is a propaganda term like they use anti-vax by the government and the Democratic Party to get their way, to try to manipulate people, to get you to do what they want you to do. And then if something goes sideways, they don't take responsibility for it. It's like dealing with a woman. If it goes sideways, it's your fault, right? It's like, yeah, but there was a vaccine mandate, and they said they instituted it at my job, and the governor he said to get vaccinated, and then there was a side effect, and whose fault is it? Right? If there's a side effect when you take it, whose fault is it? It's yours, right? It's not the government's, it's your own, which is why I have the right and the option to not take it, right? When you get divorced, when you're dealing with a woman and you get divorced, and her reason for divorcing you was, I'm not happy, I wasn't happy. Whose fault is it? Whose fault is it? Right? Whose fault is it? She's gonna say it's yours. Her divorce lawyer's gonna say it's yours. The family court's gonna try to say it's yours. And because of that, men decide if we get in relationships or not. Right? Women get to decide who they have sex with. Men get to decide if we're in a relationship or not, who we get to marry. It's been like that since the dawn of time. Right? And because of that, if I'm in a relationship, I get to choose how it goes, how it dictates. If I have to pay all the bills, I get to decide who lives in my house. It's pretty simple. Pretty simple stuff. But people just want to tell you what to do and manipulate you. But, you know, we live in America. So they can't. That's all I wanted to show you. And I think the saddest part is people are going to watch this. They'll hear them say that. And they'll still believe in racism. They'll still believe in the Democratic Party. And they'll still continue to waste their lives. God bless and Happy New Year.